All right, I think we will get started. So my name is Scott Barlow, Vice President of Global MSP here at Sophos. With me today is Bill Prout. He is the Director of Public Cloud Sales Engineering. I'm excited to have Bill on board. He's been with Sophos for a very long time. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to talk about Cloud Optix and just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions, please type those questions into the Go-To Webinar Questions section on the right-hand side. You should see a question drop down. Type those in there, and I will pause Bill as questions come in. I'm excited about Cloud Optix and the fact that on November 25th, on Monday, we are going to have this as a MSP Flex offering. For MSPs, we talk a lot about how you differentiate your business. And I think Cloud Optix is really going to allow you to create a new business model. And as we've talked to MSPs around the world, and they're leveraging some of the Cloud Optix capabilities today through the term licensing model, we're finding that MSPs are actually using Cloud Optix to help end user customers plan and design a move to the public cloud. And then the MSP will stay on board to help build and manage that, and then further to run and operate. And then as it moves forward, you're actually in the process of operating it and optimizing it for your end user customer. And there's just a tremendous differentiator for MSPs. Optix is almost like a coach for MSPs on how to move a customer environment to the public cloud. So what we're going to do today is Bill's going to run through why we need Cloud Optix, what the purpose of Cloud Optix is. He's going to go through a demo to show you the user interface and how it works. And then he's going to kick it back over to me. We'll talk a little bit about the MSP pricing and licensing model and exactly how this is sold. We actually created a whole separate fifth category of licensing for Cloud Optix in the MSP Connect Flex program. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Bill, really appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, no problem, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So, hey, before you get started, there's already a question in here, and I think it's a great question to start with. There's an MSP that's asking, can I use this as a discovery tool if I don't know if an end user customer has any products in their environment in the public cloud? So I don't know if you want to get started with that question or if you want to just jump into the presentation, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question to start with, because that hits on one of the key reasons why Cloud Optix was created, which was to increase the visibility into these public cloud environments. And when we say environments, we're typically talking about an account, a subscription on Azure, a project on Google Cloud. What happens is that it's very easy for customers in the process of testing or doing something else to spin up something like a virtual machine or create a container, and then not realize it's there, because just the way these cloud environments are constructed, you have different consoles where you configure and manage things, and you have different regions which have their own versions of those different consoles. And so it gets to be complicated to really get a good picture of what's out there. One, you're paying for that stuff if you're a customer. And two, if it's not properly secured, it's obviously a vulnerability point. So Cloud Optix is extremely focused on visibility, helping a customer understand what's there, and partners can use that obviously to help assess these environments, help customers understand what's out there, what they may need to look at in terms of security, and really help them securely get to the cloud and maintain that security posture. And that's really what Cloud Optix is. It's called Cloud Security Posture Management. And so when we talk about that term, that's the term for this new type of technology. It's really explaining what the product does, but the reason for it and the reason we need it these days is just because of the way infrastructure, that everything that we're putting our applications on, has really started to change as more and more people move to the cloud. Okay. Customers are these days trending towards not just using AWS as they were, say, 10 years ago or even less. They're using, as I mentioned, Google Cloud. They're using Azure. They're using new technology like containers, and they're changing the way that they deploy this infrastructure. It's not having a guy go and rack and stack a server. Instead, now it's a cloud architect or even a developer that's going to use an infrastructure as code template, essentially a script which is going to build the virtual network, launch the virtual machines, configure all the application aspects of it, all within one easy motion. But the problem is that those folks that are typically doing that are not necessarily security experts. So when you're using what's called DevOps processes, which is a combination of tools and methods that's used in the cloud to speed up and automate the development of software, you really have a difficult time from a security perspective, understanding where do we inject control, where do we inject security. And then you can see that some of these challenges I have on the right-hand side go right to the heart of Scott's original question. When you don't have full control, you don't really understand what's out there. So you have limited visibility. One, because you're not controlling everything that's happening. Two, because, again, the expansive nature of the cloud. And then because of that expanded cloud estate that you have, which can span multiple accounts, multiple cloud providers, and so many people touching it, manual compliance, making sure that everything is in accordance with your security baseline or any kind of external compliance, whether it's PCI or HIPAA, it's impossible for one person to actually do that, or even a team of people, because it has to be done 24/7. And attackers know that. Attackers know that one of the big problems in the cloud is just some of the stuff I described. So we're seeing more complex attacks, not only in the form of advanced malware, but the way that they're attacking these cloud infrastructure accounts. Okay, and we just don't have enough security professionals within organizations or even the industry to really address that. And that, again, that's what Cloud Optix is really here to help with. So if you look at Cloud Optix, it covers a number of different things which we'll go into the demo, but at a high level, what we're really trying to address are those visibility aspects and given the tools needed to properly respond to these threats. Okay. But on top of that, we're not only doing that in the form of, trying to play catch up, we're trying to prevent cloud security issues. And we do that by proactively looking at the environment, continuously checking for vulnerabilities and issues, but also helping with workflows. Those developers, those cloud architects we mentioned that are building these environments, let's make sure that we're proactively looking at what they're doing so that we're not waiting for a problem. Let's address it before it goes into production, for instance. And again, because of the way customers are approaching the cloud, where they get a good price on AWS for database services, and then maybe they use some services in Azure, we're seeing that we need to do this across multiple clouds. And again, that's an area that customers are really struggling with because, yeah, they may know AWS really well, but now what happens when they start putting in stuff into Azure? They don't necessarily have expertise in that. So understanding and making sure they're secure, very difficult. And that's why they're looking for help. Now, another big part of the Optix solution goes back to a core strength of Sophos, and that's artificial intelligence, machine learning. You guys are probably familiar with our other products and how we focus on a lot of that type of technology to really identify things such as new types of malware. Well, it's kind of the same thing in the cloud in the sense that, I mentioned there's advanced attacks. And so being able to identify those advanced attacks is something you really need machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to do, because you're dealing with huge amounts of data that a person simply can't spot. And again, there's these advanced methods of privilege escalation using cloud services that even the best experts are not able to really identify until after they've happened. But if you can correlate that information, put context to it the way machine learning and AI can do, that's how you can properly protect yourself. And maintaining that status that you want, that's key, because being able to show auditors or the customer themselves, hey, that you are secure, that is one of the big challenges that people face. And in fact, that's one of the reasons this product actually exists. The VP of engineering one of the founders of the technology, one of the creators of the technology of optics. He actually used to be a CTO at LinkedIn. He was responsible for the security and the infrastructure. And one of the big problems that he faced was that every time there was a big breach in the news, which these days seems to happen all the time, you're seeing cloud breaches, he would have to essentially stop everything him and his team were doing for days because they were dictated from the board as a public company. Well, you need to tell us what our security looks like. We need to understand exactly what assets we have out there in the form of, virtual machines and services, how they're secured, because we just really need to make sure this isn't going to happen to us tomorrow. So he would have to stop everything. And that just didn't seem like a good way. So he said, there's a better way to do this. And he had the idea for optics, which essentially is going to continuously look at your governance, your risk, your compliance, so that you can answer those questions immediately. Where do we stand on security? And then, as I mentioned, the way people are approaching, organizations are approaching the cloud nowadays has changed. It's not just the security team that's able to say, hey, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Instead, it's more collaborative. You have different teams working together, and the whole goal from a business perspective is to use automation, use processes, and make sure that we're speeding up the development of our applications and services we offer to the customer. And that's great from a business perspective, but security needs to be part of that. And tools like Cloud Optix, which work in the cloud, work with the cloud, that's how you can do that. Manual processes make it a much more difficult situation, because again, you're dealing with automation tools. You need an automation tool to work with you. So one of the big things that we started off talking about was visibility. Again, visibility is key. Helping customers with this is really where partners can shine, because customers are trying to focus on their own business, and they're not necessarily going to be cloud experts. And as I mentioned, especially if they're using multiple clouds. And the reason this is such a concern is if you take a look at the analysis of cloud attacks, they are, by and large, as you can see, 95%, almost all the cloud attacks that we're seeing are really related to customer mistakes and misconfigurations. They just didn't do what was right, or somebody came along and changed something later. Very common examples, we see it in the news all the time, where in the cloud, people use on AWS a service called S3. Simple storage, you can put anything in there, works great. It's only controlled by an access control list. And so it's very easy to essentially flip that to public. People do it all the time for testing, or because they want to just see if they can download something and then somebody forgets to turn it back to private. Well, now all your data is exposed. And some examples you could see on the screen there: 6 million personally identifiable records from a telecommunication company, hundreds of thousands of customer call recordings exposed by a vacation service, a discount brokerage firm lost 20,000 customer records. And remember, we see so much of this, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but us in the security industry, we realize this is the type of stuff that people use for things like phishing attacks. Get all this information, understand, the details. I can answer security questions. You can obviously use it for much more malicious things. I mean, the number of examples goes on and on. And again, these are easily preventable. These are not sophisticated malware. This is just making sure that you're checking all the boxes in your cloud environments. And if you don't, the simplest mistake could be a big failure. One example beyond what we had there is there was a recent breach, and it happened out of Miami, but it actually was for a consultant for the government of Ecuador. And the government of Ecuador basically was using this analytics firm to help them with understanding patterns and all the government information on the country. Basically, they had everything to do with tax ID numbers and financial information and addresses and family relations. That simple exposure that I explained before where somebody left an S3 bucket open, that's what happened with this particular case. And in this case, 20,000 people's records were exposed. That's almost the entire population of this country. And the result is that the government of Ecuador has actually put out a arrest warrant for the CTO of the company that was responsible for this. So this is going beyond brand damage and so forth. There's real repercussions for this type of mistake, and that's really what it was. It wasn't malicious. And the reason this is so difficult in many cases is because of the security model that's in use in the cloud. The cloud, it works a little bit different. You got to remember the cloud is they say it's out there, but it's essentially another data center or a group of data centers hosting a virtualized platform where customers can build out their networks, they can put their virtual machines, their applications that run on top, and so forth. And the way it works is that the cloud provider is going to assume responsibility for that data center, for all the services, the virtualization platform that runs there. But they say that, hey, we're exposing capabilities to you, Mr. Customer, to build those networks, to launch those virtual machines. And so because we give you so much flexibility, anything that you put in the cloud, well, that's your responsibility. So if you create that virtual network, terrific. If you don't secure it properly by configuring firewall rules or adding additional security if you need in the form of something like a virtual firewall or a host agent for your virtual machine, well, hey, that was your responsibility. And that's, again, where partners can really help customers, because customers want to focus on their business, as we know. They can't necessarily look at this stuff day in and day out. That's where customers are really looking for managed service partners to help out, keep an eye on this stuff. And the reason why this can be confusing to customers and it's such a big problem in the cloud is when you think about it, when we're looking at on-premise, we have pretty well-defined security ingress and egress points, which we can secure with something like a firewall. We know that our agents can help with east-west type of traffic communication. We can use agents, for instance, our Intercept X for that, as we all know. So it's pretty well defined. It's not that difficult. And some of those same use cases will work in the cloud. So, in AWS, a Windows server is the same as a Windows server that's on premise. No big deal. I can, take a look at that and I can secure it with agents, right? But the big problem is, as shown by these red X's, the reason I definitely want to look at that is because unlike on premise, each one of these machines actually can be exposed directly to the internet. So unlike on premise where everything has to go through that ingress egress point, each one of these guys can communicate simply by a configuration on the machine, the security group settings, and making sure it's very simple to do. And so every one of these is an exposed endpoint. And what is even more challenging is there's a bunch of different services, and I mentioned a couple of these before, things like our simple storage service on AWS, similar services on Azure called Blob, or you have storage on Google. You have containers, you have database services. All these different services, they are able to be exposed as well to the public internet very easily, and you can't put a firewall on in front of them because these are managed services and you can't put agents on them. So how do you control the security? That's what Optix can help with. And the other big problem is each one of these services, assets, okay, whether it's a virtual machine or one of those database services, generates logging information. That's really where you're getting an understanding of what does the security look like on that. But imagine trying to comb through that huge amount of data to really understand, well, did somebody make a change that exposed that service or that virtual machine to the public internet? Did somebody incorrectly configure it in the first place? You're just not going to be able to find that type of stuff. And that's really where your problems and your threats lay. Okay. And then I talked about it before. The other problem too is the rate of change. And I alluded to a couple times saying, did somebody change something? You have that with the development, with the operations team, these dev folks, they're focused on their job, which is to, hey, I need to create this application for our customers. And as I mentioned, what they're tasked with doing many times now is actually building out the virtual infrastructure as part of that, because help speed up the deployment of the application, but they're not security experts. So what happens is they are potentially doing an update in your environment by creating a new version of that template, which could open up those security holes. Now, one of the other problems that we face as basically as just a society is that all the stuff that the developers are doing in the form of automation, using these different tools to speed up the way they can deploy software and how well they can do things. Those same type of tools, those same methods in essence are being used by the bad guys. Okay, they're using scripts to constantly scan and look for exposed endpoints in the public cloud environments. They know the IP address range because they're public for AWS or Azure, and they just simply are looking for things like privileged ports. You know, okay, that's a database port, or that's SSH port 22. So we did a little experiment at Sophos where we just did a honeypot type of experiment. Very simple, very common. Hey, launch a number of different AWS environments and with common misconfigurations that we see customers doing all the time. And what we saw was pretty impressive. 5 million attempted logins over the 30-day experiment. The first attempt to exploit one of these exposed endpoints, 52 seconds. So this is just constant. Always, I mean, and customers just simply don't have the visibility to understand this is happening. They don't see it. So that's really what Optix is all about, okay? Optix helps, you can think of it in 3 different pillars: visibility, continuous compliance, response capabilities. Okay, we'll look in the demo a little bit more, but essentially when we talk about visibility, we're talking about asset inventory, helping somebody understand what's out there. I can tell you from my own experience, I manage a number of different cloud accounts in Sophos. We're a big cloud user. I have cloud accounts that our sales engineering teams use, and they do demos, they do testing, and so they're always doing different things. Well, until I got Cloud Optix, I didn't realize just how many different virtual machines and services the teams had been running up, because it's so difficult unless you're going to spend all day in these accounts looking continuously at these screens. You don't see that. Optix was able to pull that together into a single inventory. Really helped me understand what that looked like. It also helps with a topology visualization. Now, this is really interesting as well, because one of the biggest problems customers have, I mentioned earlier, is that they're responsible if they may need additional security, because there's those traditional use cases. You know, do I need to put a server agent in place or a firewall? Because you definitely do need that in many cases. Maybe I have high value data that I want to protect, or there's PCI compliance and it says you need to have an IPS. Where do I put that? It's hard to visualize that, but Optix is building out a network topology for you, so you can see that in real time, what your architecture looks like, and understand where you might place those additional security pieces. And as I mentioned, anomaly detection, calling out what is different, okay? Optix is going to be assessing on a continual basis what your inventory looks like, what your settings are in the cloud, what's happening, what user activity looks like in the form of login or data traffic, so forth. And it can then understand what's normal and show you what's not normal. Again, something that humans are simply not going to be able to do. And as I mentioned, you know, continually looking at this, we're going to continually assess based on policies that are built in or available to be customized, what your desired security state, what your desired compliance state should be, and just make sure if there's any deviation from that, let's raise an alert, or let's be able to show that in the form of a report to whoever may be interested internally or externally in the form of an auditor. And from a response perspective, we're enabling, as I mentioned before, workflows, tools, integrations, helping proactively take a look at issues and solve them, integrating with ticketing systems that developers and other people in the organization may be able to use, and essentially employing what we call guardrails, helping people go safely to the cloud, build these environments safely. It's a feedback loop to really reinforce best practices and fix problems. Okay, that's something, again, that really adds value to customers as they move to the cloud. Let's not wait until we have a problem and then go and fix it. Let's just make sure that we're continually looking at things before they become a problem. Now, in licensing, and Scott's going to go over the specifics for MSP in a bit, but when we talk about Cloud Optix licensing, we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, we don't care how many cloud accounts you may have. So if you have 10 accounts on AWS and 5 accounts on Azure and 2 accounts on Google, that's great. What we're really counting is what we call an asset. We define that as essentially virtual machines. Okay, so those might be standard EC2 instances in AWS or VMs in Azure. Okay, they could be something like an SQL server that's running, or Kubernetes nodes. So running containers. Those containers grouped together are still going to run on a virtual machine. And when they're managed by a Kubernetes system, which is the orchestration management system for these container solutions, we're going to take a look at that, how many nodes you have, which again correlates to a virtual machine. So very simple. We can let you know what's out there, and that's what the counting is all about. All right, we're going to switch over to a demo right now, but Scott, if there's any questions or anything you want to bring in.
No, I think we could proceed with the demo. There are a couple of questions and I'm working on answers. So yeah, let's proceed with the demo and we'll address those later.
All right. Okay, so let me just switch screens here. Okay, so you should hopefully be able to see my Sophos Central screen. And this is the partner dashboard, which hopefully you guys are all familiar with. We've integrated Sophos Cloud Optix into Sophos Central. And essentially what that gives you the ability to do is very much like you're used to, manage all your customers, all your products, from that same dashboard. So very, very much the way you're expecting in the form of I can create a monthly account, my customer's information, and if you go through this, you're going to just basically see Cloud Optix is listed just like you would with your other products. And then once those customers are set up and you've chosen to give them access to, or they've chosen Cloud Optix, they can use trials, they can do everything exactly the same. You're going to take a look and you'll be able to see your customers listed and how much they're consuming, how many assets are being listed. And then of course you can launch directly into the customer's environment to help them manage the actual thing. And so what we're going to do is jump into this customer's environment. This is a staging demo that we just set up, and we're going to take a look and do a quick demo. So you can see here exactly like you're familiar with. I get in here and I can choose products. So in this case, I could use Cloud Optix. And it launches me directly into the dashboard. Now, I'm going to start taking you through a demo. What I want to talk about first is how do you make that connection? What are we doing here? So Cloud Optix is a SaaS service, okay? Similar to Sophos Central. There's no installation required for this. Customers basically signing up, getting an account, okay? In this case, here's their account. And then the first time you would log in for them or they would log in, they're actually going to be put onto a getting started screen. Okay, that getting started screen is going to allow them to make these agentless connections between Cloud Optix and their various cloud accounts in AWS or Azure or GCP. Okay, for the technical folks, again, agentless, very simple. What we're using is the same secure APIs that the providers make available for any management in the cloud. We have what we call an onboarding script, and basically the whole process, and it's the same for these others, is just simply copying and running this script from the command line client these providers provide. So in the case of AWS, they have their AWS CLI client, which installs on your machine. You would just simply copy this script and then copy the next command, which would just run that script and specify the customer ID. You can see that right there. So there's other options in here and other types of environments. We can do the Kubernetes or those, what we call infrastructure as cloud environments for that proactive scanning. But once your environments are actually loaded, once the connection is made, they're all going to be listed here, and you can see the status. If there's everything working fine, success, failure, the account name. So as you can see, multiple accounts. And the first thing that the Optix scan is going to do, because it's doing what we call API sync and security checks, is it's going to do that API sync to start building out the visibility. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, that visibility is going to start off in the form of building an inventory. Okay, this inventory is going to show an aggregation of all the assets I have out in my cloud. And these assets are comprised of things like hosts, okay, containers, the networks that are deployed, storage things like those S3 buckets that I mentioned. It's going to have user accounts for identity and access management, serverless technology, and we're also going to be ingesting all the activity logs. This is what the AI is using to understand, hey, is there some kind of an anomaly happening here in the form of, somebody made a change that's different or somebody logged in from a different location. But one of the things I'll point out right away is you'll notice there's color coding. We do that right away because everything in Cloud Optix is geared towards visibility and security, of course. So we want to highlight potential issues immediately. So for instance, I mentioned before that any virtual machine in the cloud can be exposed to the public internet, doesn't necessarily have to go through a firewall. Well, this is highlighting exactly which of those machines do have that public connection. And it's going to show you an enormous amount of information. It's going to show you the account. It's going to show you the subnets, everything in it as far as the host-based firewall settings, the region it's in, and we're even going to start pulling in information on who last touched it, so we can actually query them if we need to. Do you need this? Should it be connected, or whatever we need to do here? So we give you all that information, and then we do the same kind of stuff for instance, those storage buckets we talked about. We mentioned before that's a huge area where people are seeing exposure. So we can show you the same type of information. These are publicly facing or exposed storage buckets. We can even tell you if it's encrypted or not. And one of the capabilities that Optix provides, and it's not default, is to start fixing problems. So the default settings in Optix, when we run through those onboarding scripts, we're going to set up a read-only, very safe connection. We can give Optix additional permissions, and they can be individualized per account, but we could basically say you can create you can fix a problem such as this exposed S3 bucket. So if somebody did actually make a change to that setting to say it's public versus private, well, let's have Optix change it back and alert us, let us know about it. So a very powerful feature in it. That's why we don't turn it on by default, but it can help you really maintain that security state for customers.
Hey, Bills, a question just came in regards to what is a cloud asset. Is AWS Workspaces considered a cloud asset?
So those would be individual hosts or EC2 instances, and so yes, they would be considered assets when they're going through Cloud Optix.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now, one more question before you continue. To secure an Azure VM, do I need another VM to host a firewall to work with Cloud Optix, or is Cloud Optix also acting as the virtual firewall?
So Cloud Optix is not acting as a virtual firewall. Remember what the difference here, because Cloud Optix is looking at all of the security settings in the cloud environment. So in Azure, just like in AWS or GCP, you have the concept of what we call security groups, okay? What those security groups do, and I'll show you one that's listed, is they have the firewall settings as it pertains to that host. There's also network or NACL settings as it pertains to the actual subnet that the host will live in. As you can see here, these rules govern the access. So this is, if this machine is exposed to the public internet, we're allowing access in on port 22 from any IP reach. Right away, that's a problem. So Optix is not acting in a firewall in the sense of sitting between that host and the public internet. Instead, what it's doing is it's telling you, hey, you want to take, you notice this is in red because of that setting. You want to take a look at this setting because this is a possible security vulnerability. This guy is exposed to the public internet. That's not what you want. Now, where a firewall would come in is you may want to add that for additional protection. So I mentioned before, we have this topology visualization, okay? So in this case, what we're doing is we can look at this again, any of our cloud providers and any of our different cloud accounts. If we log into that, what we're going to see is a visual representation of the architecture of our virtual network. So in this case, what we're seeing here is all of our virtual machines, and then we can see either real-time traffic, which at this moment there isn't any, but we can also see potential traffic. So what you're seeing there is traffic flows to and from the public internet, and I can drill down on that. And this is that guy that was exposed right here. Whoops, let me go back to that. This is showing you exactly the machine, the fact that it's publicly connected, the ports. So that highlights the need for additional security. So now I may want to put a Sophos next generation firewall in front of this, or just not have it connected to the public internet, okay? So this is helping us understand where we may need tools like a firewall because we're exposed, okay? So different use case optics versus traditional security like a firewall, okay? So I hope that answers that question, but we can definitely talk about it some more. So optics, again, we're looking at the state of my cloud environment. We're looking at those host-based firewalls, which are provided by the provider. We're looking at the different settings, and we're calling out where you might have problems. And we're doing that in a few different ways. What we're doing here is we're doing it explicitly the way I just showed you. We're showing you the traffic paths, the settings on those cloud provided firewalls, host and network. And we're also using our artificial intelligence to actually call out things like, hey, this is a database service according to the ports it's running. You may want to then put that firewall in front of it. This is something you got to pay attention to. Now, the other way we're looking at things, and I mentioned this is another pillar, we'll call it, of optics. We talked about visibility, we have our inventory, we have things like topology. We also have these built-in policies, which are based on things like CIS benchmark checks, GDPR, PCI, and what they're doing essentially is they're mapping the rules in those standards to the applicable controls, the settings in the cloud. So for instance, our virtual machine that's running, one of the checks may have to do with making sure, whoops, let me go to another one actually, making sure that things like, those ports that we talked about are not set, okay? We're gonna be checking for that. We saw it visually, but we're also going to be notified via the continuous compliance checking. So in this case, according to CIS benchmarks, we shouldn't have that port open to the world. That's a problem. What that's gonna result in is the policies are going to continually run, and then it's going to generate both reports, which we can use and send out to anybody, but it's also going to create alerts. Okay, and these alerts are where we can, take a look in real time at what's happening, and we can start initiating workflows to fix the issue. So if I take my alerts, we're going to see there's different types, of course, critical down to low, but what's interesting is the way we do the alerts. Okay. First of all, you're going to get summary of what's the problem is, more specific information, and it's going to give you remediation steps. These are very specific, and they're also based on the official documentation. And what's nice is here you have everything you need, even if somebody is not a cloud expert, to fix this problem. You can also then integrate and send automatically or manually this information in ticket form to something like Jira or ServiceNow, so that you can automatically keep, addressing these issues 24/7. It's a two-way integration, so we'll actually see those ticket IDs and we can track those through. So if we're helping a customer, we know the status, and we can do what's called suppress on the alert. So once we've handled this and created a ticket, send it over to that developer, maybe that created the problem in the first place, we can then suppress this, and we can put it in a note and just say that, hey, this is being worked on. And then we can continue working through. So now we've cleared up our critical, we can go to our high alerts. So this is the type of stuff we could do to help out customers. Now, in terms of integrations, we have quite a few: Jira, Slack, ServiceNow, but we also have, or Splunk, we also have integration with some of the AWS services. We have an API, which can be used for various things. And we have things like audit logs to understand what's been happening in the environment. We want to take a look at who's making changes, because we're working with our customer, for instance, making sure they didn't make a change that we're unaware of. So all these little things that you typically would need to help you out. But the whole idea, again, with Optix, visibility, understanding what might be happening, helping customers see what the cloud looks like from a security perspective now, and as they create and go to the cloud, bring more applications. And we're going to be looking for security issues, changes, and help you monitor your compliance status.
Hey, Bill?
Yep.
Another question. If I have a virtual XG firewall in AWS or Azure for my VPC, would Cloud Optix have any integration with the virtual XG?
Oh, that's a great question. So the virtual XG at this very moment, no, that's definitely going to happen. But what you have right now, the XG is not on AWS. That's actually going to happen just right after the holidays. But if you look in the topology and you are running something like a Sophos UTM in AWS as your firewall, it would show up as a Sophos UTM because we would identify that. And so the icon here would actually show this is where my firewall is, and you would understand it in your architecture. We're absolutely going to do the same thing with XG. That'll show eventually in Azure, for Azure as well as AWS. And we're also looking at integration down the road with our server protection agents because it just makes sense. A lot of our customers use those agents to add additional security to these individual hosts.
Great, thanks. Chris, let me know if that answers your question or if you have a follow-up. Go ahead.
All right. So we're just in the interest of time, what I was going to switch back just to talk very quickly about some other features that we have coming up, and then also just hand it over to Scott so we could really talk a little bit more about the actual MSP licensing. So let me just switch back to the slides. All right. So hopefully you can see the coming soon slide. So one of the nice things, and you've probably seen this with Central as well, is that we're able to release new features and functionality. We're not taking down the platform necessarily. That's just the way the world is going, and that's all based on that DevOps that I talked about. We use DevOps principles. We can manage everything, deploy new features and staging, and then in production and so forth. And so Optix is benefiting from that as well, being born in the cloud, where we're constantly adding new features. So stuff shows up that is helping. It's based on feedback from our partners and our users. And one of the big things that we heard a lot about was a new form of attack, which really relates to economics. Because these attackers, again, they know, hey, customers by and large, they don't have visibility into their environment. So they look for weak links, that low-hanging fruit. And we have an example of one that we actually did a little public kind of blurb on, I think. And it basically relates to a customer that did not have the visibility needed because they weren't using this type of technology. And one of their developers, because they were using outsourced developers, this guy got malware. They weren't using Sophos agents. He got malware on his computer, his laptop, and what that malware did was they actually stole his cloud credentials, the access keys that he used as a developer to launch, to get into the environment, to launch the templates we talked about, and basically just manage anything for his testing in the cloud. What they did was very clever. They didn't do much at first. They just did reconnaissance like they normally would. And they realized that, hey, there wasn't a lot of monitoring of this account. It's a developer account. So what they did was they waited a bit, they put together their automation tools, and then they launched a massive crypto mining exercise or attack using the customer's virtual machine. So they spun up tons of virtual machines doing crypto mining out of the customer's account. And the worst part about it is because, again, the customer didn't have the visibility, they didn't even notice this until they got the bill at the end of the month. And then they realized, why is the development account all of a sudden, God knows how many times over its normal spend? So because of that, we're actually doing some security focused spend monitoring. So we're alerting, we're letting you know about these type of issues that are coming up by just basically highlighting what the spend is and identify anomalies to that. Okay, that's just one of the things that we're going to continue to do. You can read about some other stuff that we have on our Cloud Optix landing page. We have videos and white papers and links and everything else you might need. So, please feel free. You can also, of course, do a free trial from there. All right, Scott, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Fantastic. That was great. Everybody, please keep entering in any questions that you have. There is a question that was asked earlier in regards to an NFR or a POC for Cloud Optix for MSPs. So the NFR is actually 75% off. And the reason why it's not 100% is because there are some hard costs that are associated with storage and running the Cloud Optix product in the cloud environment as is. So it's definitely something that you want to push. If you have interest or if you want to set up an NFR, please reach out to your channel account manager, your MSP representative, and we'll be happy to get that set up for you as quickly as we can. So I wanted to talk briefly about the pricing and the licensing. First and foremost, the value proposition is the same. You're going to be able to manage all of the multiple Cloud Optix customers, via partner dashboard, as you do today with all of your other endpoint and server and mobile and firewall customers. It is integrated into the MSP Flex billing, and it's going to be integrated into the usage file. So it's on the 22nd of each month. For what is being used in arrears. Very simple, very straightforward, follows every other situation, every other product that we have. It's going to be based on the number of cloud assets in aggregate across your MSP customer base. So if you have 10 customers with 100 assets each, that will fall into the 1,000 asset band. And then below, you'll see the pricing. One important note, we launched a new set of MSP Terms and Conditions, which covers both MTR as well as Cloud Optix, because both are being delivered as a service. So I posted this link in the GoToWebinar chat section, and I distributed that to all attendees. So if you have a second, just click on that. You can review the T's and C's or fill out the form. And on Monday, you'll have full access to Cloud Optix. And on December 2nd, you will have access to MTR. Those will be hidden if you have not yet accepted those T's and C's. So any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. So you guys all saw this. End-to-end protection from a single vendor. We talk a lot about the different products and services that we have as part of the MSP program, from the XG Firewall, all of the endpoint products, Server Standard and Advanced. We have two different versions with the new name. Wireless access points managed by Sophos Central, phishing simulation. We talk about mobile security. We added mobile advanced, and now on November 9th, we actually just added mobile standard as well. So you'll be able to choose if you want just the standard offering or the advanced. Disk encryption, another great opportunity for you to just kind of add a different service to your menu of offerings. And then, like we talked about today, we have the new Cloud Optix, and then yesterday we talked about MTR and EDR as part of the MSP Flex program. And Cloud Optix actually falls into its own category. So as you all know, we have the calculation of how many aggregate devices do you have across your customer base, and then that is the band at which you will purchase. Same thing with the servers. How many servers do you have across your entire customer base? Wireless access points, and then Cloud Optix. So we created a fifth category, which we call cloud, and that is where the Cloud Optix assets will fall. And so when you look at and then we have the user license category as well, which includes all of the endpoint, phish threat, mobile, disk encryption, and email as well. So when you look at the aggregate license calculation, what we want to see is hey, you have 1 to 24 assets across your entire customer base. You might have 3 customers that have 5 assets each. But then as you move up, the price is going to decrease for all of the assets that you have under management for your entire customer base. So again, it's very simple and straightforward. It actually follows the same principles as all of the other products that are part of the MSP Connect Flex program. That's all I had. I wanted to keep it short and sweet, but I do want to open it up. I see a few more questions here. Bill, you could probably remove my access because I am a very click-happy person. Will you all be following up with your current MSP partners to make sure the T's and C's are signed? That's correct. So an email is being sent out today to all MSPs globally. I also just posted the link, so if you have a chance, just fill it out. It'll take 2 seconds. Does MTR? I'll talk about MTR later. Just a second. Another great question, Bill, for you. Who is the primary competition for Cloud Optix, or is there competition that MSPs will see when they're offering this to their end user customers?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. It's a little bit confusing at first for many customers because Cloud Optix, and I mentioned before, the technology is called Cloud Security Posture Management. It's been identified by Gartner as one of the new hot things for this year and the next couple of years. With that in mind, the major security vendors such as Palo Alto and Checkpoint and Trend, they're all putting together their own version of Cloud Optix. So you're definitely going to see some of those big differences in functionality in some cases, in the sense that at a high level, they'll talk about visibility and continuous compliance, but our product is very focused on things like artificial intelligence to really spot those difficult to find threats. We're also much more proactive in trying to keep problems out of an environment, helping people move to the cloud securely versus that just continuous looking for what might be misconfigured. There's also going to be a lot of startups which are looking at this space, and again, many of those are using a subset or offering a subset of what Cloud Optix has. And then finally, the cloud providers themselves typically have similar sounding services, not in total, individually. And the problem there is a customer has to pay individually for those, both for one cloud as well as any other clouds. So when we talk about Cloud Optix, we would encourage people, we have information, of course, on the competitors, but a better explanation is just the simple. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Okay, if a customer is looking for security and they're looking to keep problems out of the cloud and they're using DevOps, for instance, a larger environment, especially where AI really, that's when a product like Cloud Optix is going to beat those other solutions, hands down.
Great. There's no other very specific questions about, there is. Can you do virtual XG in Azure as a monthly license? That's more on the public cloud program side. I don't know if you want to answer the marketplace, the Azure marketplace for virtual XG.
So not actually through the marketplace is a little different in the sense you can purchase the Sophos XG via the Azure marketplace, but that's a daily. I don't think they do monthly. They only do daily or really hourly, consumption, as well as maybe a yearly option. Monthly would typically be under just standard purchase in XG. I thought that was out of the MSP program, Scott.
Yeah, so the question was in Azure, but yeah, so I will address that. On December 11th is the tentative release date. We are going to be adding virtual firewall as a service. So basically taking the base license and converting that to a monthly subscription. So then you'll have the virtual XG base license, could be 2 core, 2 gig, 2 core, 4 gig, stuff like that. And then you can add on top of that monthly license the subscription for Enterprise Guard or Full Guard. So those will be available tentatively on December 11th. So it's a busy time for the MSP program and the MSPs out there, which is fantastic. There's another couple of questions. One of them is in regards to Autotask. So we have an EAP today for Autotask billing. that is going to be released on December 9th. So if you're using Autotask today, reach out to me specifically, scott.barlow@sophos.com. I will get you added to the Autotask EAP. The feedback, we had an early EAP, we had a couple of challenges, but the feedback has been great now. We'll basically update the number of active units for each customer, for each product, so you don't have to do that manually at the end of each month to reconcile what the billing from Sophos is going to be with the billing to make sure that it's correct to your end user customer. Some good feedback on XG Firewall as a service. That's great news. In terms of Autotask ticketing, not yet. We are working on the billing, and then we'll get the ticketing out after that. Any other specific questions in regards to Cloud Optix? Who else do you use for billing? I'm assuming that's an integration question, but from a distribution standpoint, Lifeboat, Ingram, and D&H and Synex are the distributors in North America, and we use, and then from an integration standpoint, a couple of great questions. We have billing integration with ConnectWise, and we will be releasing the billing integration with Autotask. We're also working on deeper integration with many other companies that are out there. So the XG version 18, we're doing that integration with Avic and LionGuard and a few other organizations. We're going deeper with Kaseya, Datto RMM, and ConnectWise Automate. If you're an MSP today, those scripts are actually up on Partner Portal under the MSP Hub section. You can download those and tweak those for your needs. Another question for you, Bill. I suppose I could answer it, but I'll turn it over to you. Which cloud platforms are you covering?
Yeah, so currently we're covering connections to AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. We also support native Kubernetes, the container management platform, which can run on any of those clouds or in on-premise data centers. We also support from what we call infrastructure as code, different repositories where you put these software templates. GitHub, Bitbucket are the two major ones that we support there.
Fantastic. Well, I think I'm going to try to work and give everybody 2 minutes of their day back. So I wanted to thank you, Bill. Fantastic presentation. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your extremely busy and valuable days. I know it's coming up to the holidays here in North America. So thank you. If you would like to see this presentation, shoot me an email, scott.barlow@sophos.com. Any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either me or your MSP representative or your territory sales team. So with that, we will end the webinar, and I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.